Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our seminar. So I want to introduce Bianca, who's the person we work with very closely at the World Bank on all our electric vehicle work. So actually, we just came back from Brazil last week. We had this workshop that Bianca will present some of the results of that workshop and some of the nice pictures we took last week. Bianca is a transport specialist at the World Bank, PhD in transport engineering. She's been leading all of this work in Latin America on electric buses for the World Bank. So we'll hear from her some of the results of the project that she's been working on for the last year on this topic, working with 5 cities in Latin America on electric buses. So thanks for coming, Bianca. Thanks everyone for being here.
So I'm going to present this work as Sebastian mentioned. One of the things that we tried from the beginning was to make sure that we were communicating with WRI and GIZ, which are, 2 other institutions that are working, as much as we are on this or even more. One other thing that I have to say is that the World Bank in the last years was a little bit, I wouldn't say for all the regions, but was especially in LAC, we were like, we have to fix our house before we enter into this other theme of electric buses, right? So we have so many problems in the transport systems. If we introduce this additional, let's say, requirement or investment that would have to be done with electric vehicles, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot. And let's not go there. Let's continue working on optimizing our systems, on making sure that the systems are competitive, that we're providing a good service, etc. And then we changed a little bit the strategy. We think that that's the way we've been seeing, and we are putting together a policy note on this. We think that through the agenda of electric vehicles, electric buses, we can actually move the agenda, the agenda that we think is important, including the advance of technologies and including technologies that are cleaner and will make the service so much better. So this is NDC Partnership financed work. We worked on this technical, institutional, and financial roadmap to speed up the uptake of cleaner bus technologies. And we made sure to include all other technologies besides the electric buses. And we focused at this point in 5 Latin American cities, and they are here: São Paulo, Ciudad de Mexico, Montevideo, Santiago, and Buenos Aires. The technical work mostly was conducted by STEER and for us, and we did internally also some parts of the work. We're going to publish soon the results of this work. So again, as I said it just now, we focused on these main technologies, and in electric vehicles we focused mainly in our analysis in slow charge electric buses. So what was the methodology? We did a literature review, and in this business now, because it's changing so fast, if you look at the literature and you check back in 1 month, it's completely changed. It's kind of like that in all sectors, but especially on this one. So this is an ongoing work, and when we publish, I have to publish fast, so I make sure I'm not behind. We did focus groups in each city with all the sectors: energy, environment, and transport at the local and the federal level. We did local workshops, more or less 20 people with each city. So we had this integrated approach. So it was always, one of the things we observed is that sometimes the targets are defined by environment, or energy is interested too, but then transport gets informed, and they are very they push it back. They said, this is undoable, etc. So we wanted to get the integrated views of these 3 sectors, and we organized the analysis in 5 enabling factors. So we looked at public, the characteristics, operational characteristics of the public transport, the routes, the operational costs. We looked at how do we do tendering and concessions of the bus services, and we looked at pilot experiences. We looked at environmental policies, the commitments, the standards, the monitoring of pollution, and regulations in environment. We looked at energy and infrastructure, so what are the current sources of clean energy, and infrastructure issues related to energy, and the potential of those low carbon sources for where they are in the energy matrix and how clean they are right now. And we looked at governance and market issues, so institutions, regulations, and procurement, which is kind of, and all these, obviously, we're dividing in these 5 enabling factors, but they obviously interact with each other, right? So procurement has to do with public transport and how they contract these services, but also has to do with governance and institutions. So, I mean, I'm going to mention just a few highlights of each one of the 5 areas. Obviously, if you want, you can read the entire report. But some highlights of each one of these aspects. For these 5 cities, we can see that all of the 5 cities are above the recommended levels of PM, particulate matter 10 and 2.5, and except for Montevideo, but Montevideo is changing rapidly, and motorization is growing, so this will soon change. And this is kind of, Montevideo is, and Uruguay has 95% of their electricity clean, or 99, and etc., has enormous potential to charge these vehicles at night. They are underutilizing very cheap energy, etc., and they're not taking advantage of these newer technologies, right? When we see the energy matrix aspects, I mean, electricity is clean in most of these countries, but the whole matrix, the whole energy matrix, not necessarily, right? So we see Mexico and Argentina generating energy still in very poor conditions. Chile changing rapidly because they're working a lot on renewable energies. So I think that the situation for Chile was much worse just recently. Brazil, despite we know that Brazil is a big electricity generator and uses a lot of its energy from clean hydroelectric power, we still have non-renewable as one of the main energy generators, 40% in oil and derivatives, for instance. But all of the countries are growing their renewable share of energy. The analysis is, okay, are we pushing through electric vehicles, but how is electricity being generated? How is their energy matrix, right? It may not make sense from if you want to clean the bus system, from a local pollutants perspective, it's good, but it may not change the overall situation of not having renewable energy at the source, right? So here is a little bit of the numbers for the public transport. As you can see, systems are very different and completely different. Buenos Aires is a system of permissions that were given a long time ago, and they keep just renewing the buses and has a very new fleet. The average year is 5 years. Mexico City, the average age is 20 years. You operate with a lot of small buses. 30,000 is the number that we could, that everyone agreed on, but it's not an actual number because nobody knows. That's the truth. Transporting roughly these 2 cities, the same amount of people, right? So if you go to São Paulo, for instance, a smaller fleet, transporting 5.8 million, 5 billion, almost 6 billion people a year. So a very efficient system, but also we're talking about different sizes of buses and a system that is much more structured than Mexico City, for instance. And here you have the number of operators. So you come from Buenos Aires, 193 private operators, to Montevideo, just 4 operators that have been there forever. And you see, the systems reflected in very different numbers here. And so maybe the solutions for each one of these cities could be a little bit different. We looked at aspects of governance and markets, and we looked at the institutions, how is transport organized, how much the federal government has power over the local authorities to implement changes or to require changes in the bus fleet, etc. And obviously some countries more than others. But one of the points that it was clear from the analysis is, well, first, the operators have a very strong position in Latin America in most markets. So basically, they've been ruling this for years now. And the other thing is that you should start with federal and local governments aligned. You need the support from the federal government because energy policies and environmental policies most of the times are defined at the national level. And so you want to make sure that these things are aligned, and so you want to work always local with the federal, despite the local being, in general, the concessions of the owners of the concession, and who gives. We looked at funding and financing, how these systems are being funded and financed, and one main conclusion about all these systems is that they are highly dependent on government funding. Subsidies are provided in different ways. In some cases, they are through gratuities, which are not really subsidies, but it's a policy that makes transport prices different. But in general, subsidies are there for the majority of the cases, ranging from, sometimes you have in some subsystems that are self-sustainable financially. So Mexico, you have the main core BRT system self-sustainable, but then the rest of the system which feeds the system is not. So there is kind of a compensation. So we make this very clean, but the systems here are subsidized. So overall the system is subsidized. Financing in general comes directly from governments, development banks, and also manufacturers. So manufacturers are the ones providing financing to the bus operators to purchase new buses. And this has its own implications. In general, the government lines of credit to purchase of the buses are not working because and the green funds, etc., because they require that the operators have some financial conditions that they don't meet. And the manufacturer is offering much better conditions within this. And also, operators may not want the transparency that comes from getting funds from bilateral banks, and they don't want to release all the information that it's their secret power in a sense. So we saw all these difficulties, but obviously there are many opportunities. And one is that the cleaner agenda everyone is talking about it. Everyone is talking about the electric vehicles. All the cities that we are involved in the workshop, we had 14 cities participating. They were all thinking of some kind of pilot, etc. So this is the moment. Also and it's not there. Also from an industry perspective, we see that battery prices are coming. The prices are coming down, and all the work that Sebastian has done on that. We think that there might be an inflection there. We might be in an inflection point where, from now on, it will become a doable technology. The cities and countries have environmental and energy efficient commitments that they have to comply with. People see that the bus industry is one that, with a few signatures and a few agreements, you start moving the agenda, whereas the individual cars, private cars, is more spread out. It requires a little bit of and also it requires other types of incentives, and also the multilaterals and the financiers are interested in financing public transport more than they're interested in financing countries' policies on private vehicles. And public money in the end, it's better. The better use of this is through public transport, maybe not private, right? Transport. Lithium production in some of these countries within the region is very high. There's a lot of reserves, and so Chile is one of them. I forgot, I got a list of this, but I forgot who are the winners, but Chile comes to mind. There are, other energies that are being studied, and for some countries it might make sense to do natural gas as maybe a stepping stone, and here we have, it's a very polemic subject. WRI has strong position against it, but they are considering this as a stepping stone towards cleaner technologies. We've been seeing lots of bus pilots. Each city has 1 or 2 buses, and or more, and they are starting to test this more systematically. And there is this existing and clean funding, right? There's a lot of interest from the financiers, although this has been on and off, and although the difficulties is how do we reach these operators to get the funding through them, and how we make sure that our requirements for financing them are not too stringent, that they don't take advantage of the funding. So challenges, there's still a lot of lack of information on costs and performance of cleaner buses, right? Electric buses in particular. So each city is doing their own thing, but they don't, share this data. And this was something that came out really strongly from the workshop we organized. We also, in some cases, have very nascent environmental policies and normatives for alternative technologies. So they're all trying to figure out what's their e-mobility strategy. And we are all learning, to be honest. The bank, maybe WRI as well. And so we're trying to understand how we support the countries to come up with their national strategies on this. And they are all saying a lot, but not really. They don't have consistent still material that, okay, I've analyzed everything and I have a very good strategy on e-mobility. There's a lot of confusion on the subsidies and how these, for instance, subsidy to diesel kind of cancels any subsidy that you give to clean, right? To electric buses. I'm from transport, and we try to do this as much as we could as the energy sector also at the World Bank. And I saw some conflicting views, and I think now we're getting into more of a cohesive vision of what there is. But energy, we see in practice that energy companies are seeing this as an opportunity, a way to sell energy overnight where they don't necessarily have a customer, and so they are willing to make some investments. That's what we've been seeing, but at a small scale for now, but possibly soon in a larger scale. But there's also, we also have to study, and we see that it's not negligible, the investments that we have to make in infrastructure in energy. So the bottom line of the energy message is there's no problem, we can deal with that, especially with buses. It's not going to be a problem, but we have to look into this, because when you start, actually digging through the pilots, etc., well, there has to be a space for a charging station, and you have to make some investments there, etc. And so cities that are a little bit more advanced in this agenda, like Santiago, they're now getting to the problems of energy. Most of the cities are not there yet. They're just, they are before. They are either at the environmental policies, or they might have reached transport, but they are just getting to transport, to the transport problems. One challenge that is going to be, I think, important is that you have to manage these institutional framework, which is already enough complex for transport, local, federal, several agencies doing the same things, a lot of superposition of activities, etc. But you have to bring to another level. So you have to include energy and you have to include environment. So this will be a challenge that has to be dealt with. Lifting financing constraints. So yeah, the thing that I mentioned about the fact that it's going to be really hard to finance these operators if we don't have some more transparency, and if we can't gather that information that we need about their systems to be able to understand if they are financially sustainable or not, if we're putting money into a leaking bucket, or if we are actually helping the agenda move along. Another thing is that none of these pilots are working at scale, so we still don't have the critical mass to analyze this at scale. So these are a little bit of the recommendations. This was kind of the tone of last week's workshop. I have another slide on takeaways from the workshop, but one of the problems that we see is that these systems are not competitive systems. They're basically, even the ones that are concessions, they're not really open concessions, transparent, that allow for real competition. It's the same players all the time. And a lot of pressure from these concessionaires to either not issue these concessions, because they are there and they just keep signing extensions of their contracts, etc., or they want to have concession periods of 20 years. And honestly, if we do that in some cities, we're going to be talking about this again only in 20 years, So we see that as an opportunity. Then, as I said, the agenda of electric vehicles for us is an opportunity to discuss things that are, if we continue pouring money into the leaking bucket, if we continue having systems that are not efficient, we just added another another problem, which is the technology ready, is a little bit more expensive, and so, in some cases we're creating we're increasing the problem instead of fixing it, from the roots. So the subsidies have also to look into questions of environmental performance instead of supply-based subsidies. All these cities have supply-based subsidies, so basically they're running empty buses. There's no consistent effort for optimization of the routes and to improve, taking into consideration the quality of the service, etc. But the cities are not looking into optimization that much. They're mostly looking to maintain, this operation going and securing their political bases, and then actually looking into those. Extend pilots and tests with more piloting, and monitoring. We'll share and assess this together in Latin America at least. More transparency. Identify the appropriate candidates. So when you're starting a new pilot, don't do some pre-analysis. It's kind of basic, but people don't do that. And analyze which are the winners, right? Corridors that will have a good performance, and as technology evolves, then we can put in the entire city, but choose the right ones in the beginning so you don't burn, and you choose the wrong route with lots of ups and downs or whatever, makes lots of people coming in and out, and then you say, oh no, this technology doesn't work. No, let's choose wisely which ones we're going to start. Look at the energy infrastructure and find the low-hanging fruits. Where's the place that there is, this electric station that is super easy to install? So look into all these aspects together. So from a route perspective, which is the most optimal route, but also where the energy is there, and it's very easy to hook up a plug to. So let's look at these low-hanging fruits. And innovate in instruments for funding financing. I think that there is a much more willingness to take risks to finance these new technologies. So, and as I said, energy can be able to take some part of those risks, right? Because for them it's a big win at the end. So look for who would get the big wins and willing to take more risks. So this was a few pictures from last week. We did this in partnership with WRI and GIZ. One thing that we, from the beginning, and maybe repeating myself, was that we tried not to do the same things that other players are doing. And I've heard from other colleagues from other institutions, no, but the government has to do that. We all know that the government doesn't do that, and we are doing the same thing, and we are both looking at the same corridor, and they don't understand that WRI and World Bank are not competitors, and and so we try to make sure that we were informing each other of what we're doing, and one of the doing this workshop together, I think, is also a step on that direction. The first day we shared global knowledge. We had people from all over the world, India, China, the US, the foothill experience here, Spain, Chile on the energy side, and we had a full day of presentations plus our institutional presentations. The second day, cities presented their own problems, and we focused each session on each one of these sub-themes. Third day, we had this Shark Tank style where the cities presented their I wanted to see if they learned something after 3 days, and it was really interesting to see that all cities have projects on this, all but one, I think. And the fourth day, we visited Itaipu, and they have an electric mobility center there, which was really nice. And some people, less nerdy people, went to the to the Macuco Safari, which was visited to the waterfalls. So I have some pictures of the event and some takeaways. I said most of it, but find good partners, increase transparencies, and build synergies. This is a more high-level, takeaways. Involve all the 3 sectors, plus finance, and municipality and federal early so that they can take ownership. Identify potential champions in each sector with the help of local staff. Invite, this is for the workshop, high qualified international speakers. Put ministries or secretaries in the same for the same country into a team and let them work together to, they have to talk. You basically force them. You put them in a nice hotel and you force them to. But I think that the most important things are these two last ones. Cities are definitely missing frameworks and databases for monitoring new pilots, and I'm happy that Sebastian jumped into this and said this is something for the WRI to do. So we will hope to support you guys through this process. And cities are kind of missing the big elephant in the room, which I said in the last day, which is the markets are completely captured. The provision of bus services, it's going to be very difficult or much slower to change if they feel very disempowered. We had a mix of decision makers and also technicians there. I mean, that was the initial. We didn't manage to do that for all the cities, but the technicians feel very disempowered. They see, they're working on their technology, pilots, etc., because they don't feel they have the chance to change the system, right? And most of them said, okay, great, I think what you're pitching is perfect, but how do I get from here to there, right? And so, I mean, there's a lot of fights in the way and battles, and how should I start with the pilot? Should I start with a small segment? And we're hopefully supporting them to do that. Yeah, and that was it.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.